Your monthly subscription box from postflybox.com includes all the materials needed to tie a dozen flies, along with some extra goodies. The Near Nuff Sculpin roughly imitates one of warmwater fish species' favorite forage items, sculpins. While not an exact imitation, as the name implies, it's near enough. The foundation of the fly is a heavy-duty size 8 hook. Begin by getting the hook firmly secured in the jaws of your tying vise. You can then load a bobbin with the spool of olive unit thread. Get the thread started on the hook shank behind the eye, and after taking a dozen or so wraps rearward, snip off the excess tag. Wrap all the way down to the hook bend, then back up the hook shank to add some texture to the otherwise shiny and slippery hook shank. End with your tying thread a full eye length and a half back from the back edge of the hook eye. Pick up one of the pairs of dumbbell eyes and lay it diagonally on top of the hook shank at the location of your tying thread. Take a couple of cross wraps to roughly position the eyes, then more cross wraps to begin locking them down. End with a couple of wraps around just the hook shank behind the eyes. Now, do a series of yoke wraps, which go over the eyes but under the hook shank on either side of the hook. Again, take 2 or 3 wraps around just the hook shank behind the eyes. To really lock the eyes in place, take flat wraps below the eyes but above the hook to pull all the previous wraps in tight. End with your thread at the back edge of the dumbbell eyes. Check to make sure the eyes are directly on top of the hook shank and perpendicular to it. Take thread wraps down the hook shank and leave your thread hanging at the start of the hook bend. Pick up 2 of the grizzly olive hen feathers. They're the wider, webbier ones as compared to the strung saddle hackle. Align the tips of the 2 feathers with their concave or dull sides facing each other. Measure to form a tail about a hook in length. Strip off the fibers from both feathers below that measurement point, then snip off the excess butt ends of the feathers in line with the back edge of the dumbbell eyes. Lay the bare stems on top of the hook shank and take tight wraps of tying thread to secure them there, up the shank to behind the dumbbell eyes. The feathers should be sandwiched together like so. Snip a single strand of pearl crystal flash free from the hank and find its midpoint. Anchor the midpoint to the top of the hook shank behind the eyes and take thread wraps rearward, securing the rearward pointing portion of the flash to the near side of the hook all the way back to the base of the tail. Pull the forward pointing portion back and anchor it to the far side of the hook shank. Then take thread wraps forward to once again behind the eyes. Trim the crystal flash so it extends just past the tail. Pull an ample clump of the olive dubbing free from the packet. Use the dubbing to create a fairly substantial 3-inch long dubbing noodle on your tying thread. Start taking wraps with the noodle so the dubbing begins right at the base of the tail. With the dubbing established on the hook shank, you can twist the dubbing noodle clockwise, as if you're looking down on it, into a tight little rope. Take touching wraps with the dubbing rope up the hook shank, twisting it as you go to create a lightly tapered, somewhat segmented, and durable body on the fly. Ideally, you should end with bare tying thread right behind the dumbbell eyes. Next, pick up a single saddle hackle feather and with the shiny side facing you, strip off the lower fuzzy fibers from both sides of the stem. Then, use your tying scissors to snip the lowest remaining fibers off into a small Christmas tree-shaped tie-in anchor. If it's a little long, you can snip that off to make it shorter. To ensure the feather wraps correctly, strip a few more fibers from just the top edge of its stem, like so. While keeping the feather in the same orientation, lay the tie-in anchor against the near side of the hook behind the eyes and take tight thread wraps to anchor it. Make open spiral wraps with your tying thread over top of the dub body to relocate it back to the base of the tail. Now, get hold of the saddle hackle feather and take 2 flat wraps with it, one right behind the other in back of the dumbbell eyes. Then switch to open spiral wraps all the way down to the base of the tail. Use your tying thread to firmly anchor the feather's tip. You can snip the excess feather tip off with your scissors or break it off like so, if you're feeling lucky. Now, make open spiral wraps with your tying thread up the hook shank, doing your best not to trap hackle fibers as you go. This effectively counterwraps and protects the feather's delicate stem. End with your tying thread once again at the back edge of the dumbbell eyes. Now, pluck another smaller clump of olive dubbing free from the packet and use it to create a slender noodle on your tying thread, about 3 inches in length. Sweep the hackle fibers rearward and out of the way as you take cross wraps between the eyes with the dubbing noodle. If you need to, you can always use a little more dubbing to create another noodle and use it to further fill in the head area, ideally ending with bare tying thread at the back edge of the hook eye. Pick up your whip finish tool and use it to do a 4 or 5 turn back to front whip finish, seat the knot well, and snip or cut your tying thread free. A drop of head cement, here Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails, applied to the exposed thread wraps will ensure they won't come unraveled and increase the durability of the fly. Because of the dumbbell eyes, a Near Nuff Sculpin will ride with the hook point up and with an enticing jiggy motion that many warmwater fish species find hard to resist.